All right guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be looking at the Winchester Model 12, also known as and advertised as the Perfect Repeater. Now, today I'm going to be going into the guns that we have here today to share with you, as well as some other models and variations that they made over the years. Then we're going to go over the actual shootability of the gun, as well as my thoughts on it. And then we're going to wrap up the video going back in time to talk about the history of the gun and how it all came to be. So with that being said, let's dive into the guns that we have today to show you guys. All right, so now let's talk about some of the variations and different grades and different models that they made. So as you can expect, after 52 years of production and over 2 million made, they had a lot of different variations and grades that they could get for different shooters that needed them for different disciplines. So some of those things would be like, barrels ranging from 20 inches out to 32 inches, fixed chokes ranging from cylinder to improved cylinder to modified to full. And even on top of that, different checkering and different wood and different designs that you could get on these models. So kind of the sky was the limit, and they had a lot of different grades throughout the years. So what I want to do today is just kind of cover some of the more typical grades that you might run into. So for example, right here we actually have a 1958 12 gauge field grade, and this one has a 28-inch barrel on it with modified fixed choke. It does have the American walnut furniture, and it also has the corncob fore-end that was pretty popular on these. This one is just a plain barrel, which most of the field grade were just that plain barrel. However, if you got into something a little bit fancier, which might have been like a skeet or a trap or a deluxe or a pigeon, you'd be looking at that vented rib barrel. You might be looking at just better checkering, better furniture on it. There's a couple guns that you really might want to get your hands on because they're a little more sought after. So starters, I talked about the 28 gauge, and they made less than 3,000 of those. Now, obviously I don't have one here today to show you, but if you did get your hands on one of those, that would definitely be something that you want to keep. Other ones that were also really popular were the heavy duck, because most of the guns were 2 3/4 inch. However, in 1935, they came out with a model called the heavy duck, and that could actually take 3-inch magnum shells. And how you see one of those is not only looking on the barrel to see that it takes 3-inch shells, but it also on the barrel says super speed and super X. So if you see that on the side of a barrel and it says 3-inch shells, you got yourself a heavy duck, which is also a little more sought after. Now, another trap grade gun was the Black Diamond, and that was basically a trap gun with a vented rib barrel on it. And it also had some really nice enhanced checkering on the stock, as well as the fore end, and those also go for a premium too. Now, I also wanted to talk about the shotguns that more so appealed for the military and police and law enforcement. And that basically looks like the same gun, right? Same stock, same furniture. However, these came with a 20-inch barrel. So I'll quick clear it for you. But these came with a 20-inch barrel, and it was a cylinder choke. Now, this would be basically a riot version. However, they also made a trench version. The trench version was unique in that it had basically a heat shield that went over the barrel, and then it had a bayonet lug as well, so you could put a bayonet on the end of it. Now, those were incredibly effective in World War I with trench warfare. Also, they had the ability to slam fire. So again, very effective tool in World War I. In fact, the Germans tried to, say, hey, you can't use those because they were that effective against their soldiers in the war. So this is definitely an example. This is a 1941 Riot Model 12, which is kind of cool. Don't have a trench gun to show you guys, but between the 1958 field grade and the 1941 Riot grade, pretty cool stuff. So those are just some of the grades that I wanted to cover with you guys today. There are even more out there, probably some that I've never even heard of before. So if you're interested, definitely go out there, do some research. If I missed something that you want to share, please put that in the comments. I love reading the comments, I love learning, and our other viewers love learning too. So with that said, that is some of the grades. Now next, I want to actually talk about the shootability of the Model 12 and then wrap it up with my final thoughts. All right, so now let's talk about shootability. Now, as some of you guys know, I absolutely love pump action shotguns. Always have, always will. You know, everything from the sound that they make when you rack them, just in terms of just how smooth that action is. You're not relying on a gas system or a recoil system. And, you know, they pretty much eat whatever you feed them, which is awesome. So lots to love about a pump action shotgun, and I think a lot of you guys know what I'm talking about. So let's talk about the shootability of the Model 12. Now, I don't have a lot of experience with the Model 12, so to do this video, I thought it'd be appropriate to grab another pump action shotgun that I do have a lot of experience with, so I could give a reasonable comparison, right? This one's a 1958 Winchester Model 12 field grade, 12 gauge, and I grabbed a 1951 Remington 870 Wingmaster 12 gauge, kind of field grade because neither of them have a rib barrel or anything fancy, right? So pretty plain. And went out to, the range, brought some Federal 8-shot target loads with me and saw how they could break some clays. Well, I wasn't super shocked, but I couldn't really tell that much of a difference. Both these guns performed flawlessly, from loading to ejecting to firing. The triggers felt great. Mounting them felt great. Swinging them felt great. It was a lot of fun, you know. 2 pump action shotguns, just shooting target loads, breaking clays. Really, really good time. If there were some differences that I would note, I would maybe say that the Remington has a smoother action. But you know what, to be honest, I could just chalk that up to maybe because I'm more used to it. I'm more comfortable with it. But I did feel like the Remington did have a smoother action. But what I also was kind of impressed with the Model 12 is that even though that it was made in 1912 and the Remington was made in 1950, and there was 38 years apart of innovation and technology between these two, to be fair, they both had the same amount of recoil. At least I didn't notice the difference in recoil. And they both had a great fit and feel, and really just both performed excellent for me. So I think it's going to probably come down to shooter's preference. So depending on if you're Remington or Winchester or Mossberg, that might play a factor in it, or hopefully you're playing more of a factor based on, how does it feel to you when you mount it, when you shoot it. Both guns take apart super easily, so that's not an issue. You can take them apart in the field, clean them, maintain them, even repair them if you need to, and easily put them back together with really no tools. So those are some of the perks of both the guns. Like I said, I think it's going to come down to shooter's preference. With that said, I do want to jump into my final thoughts on the Winchester Model 12. And, what can I say? 52 years of production between 1912 and 1964. It saw 4 wars: World War I, World War II, the Korean War, and the Vietnam War. It's been adopted by police departments and correctional facilities for decades and decades. So, with all that said, it's been around for 113 years, and I feel like it's truly a timeless design that's really stood the test of time. Its reputation is outstanding. Now, with all that said, let's take a step back and take a look at the history of how this gun came to be. So first things first with history, as most of you guys know, Winchester's first pump action shotgun was actually the 1893 and 1897 models. Now those were both John Browning models that Winchester purchased and produced. Basically it was a pump action shotgun. It was bottom feeding, side ejecting, and they did have a disconnected trigger, so you could actually slam fire these models. Another feature of the 1897 and 1893 was that it had an external hammer on it. Now, some people loved that, others not so much. Some of the reasons why people didn't like it was because depending on where your thumb was on that stock, when you cycled that action, the bolt actually went out the back of the receiver, and if your thumb was in the wrong spot, you'd scrape or cut your thumb, which obviously was pretty uncomfortable. Another thing is that because the gun opened up that much with the bolt coming out the back, you kind of exposed yourself to dust, debris, dirt, anything like that that could get into that action and kind of gum it up over time. So those are some of the cons. Now, around the same time period in 1908, Remington had come out with the Model 10, which was basically a bottom feeding, bottom ejecting, hammerless pump action shotgun. So kind of solved some of those problems of the 1897. So Winchester wanted to keep up, right? So T.C. Johnson, who was an engineer for Winchester at the time, took a look at the 1897 and he basically said, yep, I want to refine this, I want to simplify it, and I want to remove this external hammer. So he went to the drawing board and he did just that. He basically created a pump action shotgun that had the ability to be taken down easily for maintenance, cleaning, and transport. It still was bottom feeding, side ejecting. It was hammerless, and it was actually Winchester's very first hammerless shotgun. And it still had the slam fire option, which is really nice. So with that being said, that was basically the model 1912. And again, I said 1912 because it was originally dubbed that. Let's talk about the actual, I guess, gun itself. So in 1912, they came out with the 20 gauge, and you could only get it in 20 gauge, which I don't actually know the reason why, and if you do know the reason why, please share in the comments. But it wasn't until 1913 that they introduced the model 12 in 12 gauge as well as 16 gauge. So that was the second year. And then it wasn't all the way until 1934 that they introduced it in a 28 gauge. Now, they never came out with a 410, and I guess the reason why is because based on the ergonomics and the design, it just wouldn't work or make sense for the gun. So the only gauges that you could get were either 12, 16, 20, or 28. Another thing to mention is that with a 28 gauge, they made less than 3,000 of those. So with that said, let's talk about production a little bit. So they were made between 1912 all the way to 1964. So 52 years of production, a pretty good long run. In that time period, they made about 2 million of these guns. So again, going back to that 28 gauge, less than 3,000 of those made out of 2 million. Huge difference, right? So very sought after. Most of these guns actually were field grade models in 12 gauge. So definitely appealing to hunters and sportsmen alike. So that's a little bit about the history. Now, a lot of you might be asking at this point, like, wow, 52 years of production, 2 million made. It was used by the military and police. Why did they discontinue it? Well, the simple answer is cost. So in 1950, Big Green Remington came out with America's best-selling shotgun, the Model 870. So that was basically a bottom-feeding, side-ejecting shotgun, very similar to the Model 12. However, it was designed 38 years later, so it's a little bit more, I guess, modern, if you will. Also, the way they designed it, it wasn't as handcrafted and hand-fitted as the Model 12 was, so it was very inexpensive to produce, and that's actually why Remington came out with it in the first place. So after 14 years between 1950 and 1964, Winchester kind of just took a look at the numbers and said, yeah, it doesn't make sense anymore. We can't compete with this. So they did decide to discontinue it in 1964. Now, moving forward, they quickly came out with the Model 1200, which they basically released later on in 1964 after they discontinued the Model 12. And then in 1978, they revamped it to the Model 1300. So those are some of the successors that came after the original Model 12. So with that said, I know I threw a lot of history at you guys, but I thought it was a pretty cool story on a very classic and iconic shotgun. Now, as always, we were lucky to get our hands on these guns here today and share the information with all of you. If you do like this kind of information, please take the time to like, subscribe, and ring that bell so you can get notifications of all of our future content. We truly do appreciate the support. Now, with that said, this is Scott signing off with the Average Joe's Armory, and we will see you guys in the next one.